Hi, I'm Christina, and I want to welcome you to this episode of Women's Health, Wealth, and Happiness Interviews to Inspire. This episode is sponsored by Stratapo Women's Associations Strategy, Opportunity, and Building Better Futures. Our next guest is a true adventurer and creative spirit who has spent the last 6 years living a life of movement, connection, and caregiving. After 8 years of getting crispy around the edges as a high school biology teacher in the New York City public schools, she decided to follow her heart and start her first entrepreneurial venture with Memories Out of the Box. Helping people tell their stories through their own stuff, cherished mementos, and heirlooms, she turns memories into visual narratives capturing the essence of their lives. Through her second venture, Show and Tales, she hosts exhibitions of interactive story sharing about the things that matter, and you can watch more of her YouTube show, Things That Matter. Making the bold decision to sell her Brooklyn apartment and embark on a journey of exploration in her 21-foot Winnebago, affectionately named Brooklyn, Martie's plan was to travel and find a new place to call home, but life had other plans. Now splitting her time caring for her 88-year-old mother in Vermont and her 90-year-old mom-in-law in Albuquerque, she has embraced her role and learned lessons about life and herself along the way. While her journey has taken many turns, happiness found her in the form of reuniting with the love of her life 30 years later after they first met on the dance floor. Please welcome our next guest, legacy artist, Martie.
Hello, Christina. Thank you so much for this opportunity to be here. I'm excited. This has been a long time coming, and I'm grateful that we're here now. So thank you for that introduction. I am thrilled to share just a few more things. Needless to say, for those of you who are watching on YouTube, you will see that I have a background that says things that matter. And so needless to say, I am not fond of things. Being a digital nomad and moving 9 times before high school, I didn't have a lot of things that I carried and had around me for my entire life. So it's not that I'm encouraging people to think that things matter. It's realistically, it's the stories that get attached to those things that do, the things that we hold onto, the things we surround ourselves with, that we adorn ourselves with, that we cherish, that when we touch it or when we see it, we think of an experience or a person or a relationship, a friendship, somebody who's passed away. We hold on to these things. And that's why they matter, is because the stories somehow get attached to them.
Martie, your health word is caregiver. You have learned how to embrace it. Tell us more about the rewards of being a health caregiver.
Yes. So, like lots of people, probably lots of your listeners, we don't necessarily plan on things in our lives, but they are given to us. They are presented to us, and our choice is to embrace it or not, making no thing that you should or anything. But as an entrepreneur, as someone who has the flexibility working for myself, and an aging mom and mom-in-law, I ended up realizing that I wanted to, and I wanted to be there as much as I could because, as you know, my mom-in-law and my wife live in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and my mom lives in Vermont. So there's 2,200 miles between us. So I'm not that day-to-day person in care, and neither one of them actually need day-to-day care, but they need to get to their appointments. They need to, like, they have, mobility issues and all of that. And what I've realized is that, as I said in our earlier communication, is that I've learned so much about life and about myself and about what matters. And needless to say, I've always known that relationships matter. But I also think that there's a lot of personal healing that I'm doing in terms of relationship healing between my mom and I, and also learning more about my wife's mom, who, like I said, just turned 90. So I'm embracing. I have no idea what I'm in for. It's part of life, and I'm happy to embrace and learn and move forward and figure this out as we go.
As my mother is 82 as well, you have a different respect and learning for their lives. I just went through some pictures of hers, and suddenly they meant so much more to me than they ever did growing up looking at them. What kind of things have you found out about your mother and your mom-in-law that were surprising to you?
Yes. So I think the most surprising thing that I learned about my mother in law is after we had her sell her home and move in with us while she had an addition built on our home in New Mexico, was that she has severe ADHD. Mm. And my mom is highly anxious as well. But their they're just total there couldn't be any more difference between them because Lucille, her ADHD, her anxiety is wrapped up into creating. She is constantly creating. She needs to have all her projects out at all times, all her crafts, all her plants, everything needs to be out, and the messier it is, the happier she is, right? So that's how she manages her life. Well, I was raised with a mom who has high anxiety, and how she manages it is with OCD. So everything is put away in its place and all of that kind of stuff. So it's just, and what that has made me realize, obviously, living in both these situations, is to recognize my own anxiety. And that's where, when you said, what is a word that, you would use for health? And it seems kind of weird to say caregiver, but realistically, what I'm learning is to take good care of myself, better care of myself in a lot of ways, because I'm in this role as a caregiver. So, and including recognizing my stressors, my anxiety is all part of my mental health, my physical health, my emotional health, all of that. This is forcing me to do that where, before I was kind of, you know, not thinking about it, not thinking that I'm aging too and I need to care for myself. So the caregiving is learning to take me and my wife and my mother-in-law and my mom.
So on that note, what practices have you began for yourself?
Yes. So when I have always been a hiker and a walker, so that has been like, no matter what is happening, I get in my walks. So that's really important. I probably walk anywhere from 2 to 4 miles a day. Um, I would say at least 5 days a week, depending on weather and all of that kind of stuff. But that is like my go-to thing, is to be out in nature as much as I can. Sometimes it's too hot out in Albuquerque, so I'm mall walking, which I don't love, but it gets me out and gets me moving. So that's good. I also am not very good at self, like, I need a group. I need other people to motivate me to work out on a regular basis. So I joined a small gym up here. It's a franchise, but I joined it. It's a boot camp. It's a half an hour. They change it because I get bored very easily. So they change your workout every day is changed. It's all figured out for you. You just show up and you do the half an hour work. And anyway, and it's about getting stronger, not getting thinner, not getting, like whatever. It's not about who looks the best in the yoga pants. It's literally we have younger, probably 20-year-olds up to a couple of people older, a couple of women older than me. It's primarily women, but we have a few men that are part of it as well. And it's just a nice camaraderie. And so that's a big thing. Um, in terms of mental health, is that helps a lot with that as well. But I also think that, I do some meditation work, and some, reflection time that helps me manage the stressors of it.
It's wonderful to take care of yourself first. The mindfulness of, okay, what do I need? Because if I'm not feeling whole today, how can I give myself to somebody else and feel whole for them?
Absolutely.
What advice would you give to others who are going into a caregiver position? Because I know and it's not the easiest thing to do. And you do things that you never thought you would do before because they just need to be done.
This is true. This is true. So luckily, in terms of those things that you didn't think you were going to do, the reality is that I grew up on a farm, and thanks to my mom who loves animals more than people, and so I grew up on a farm, and so getting my hands dirty, doing things, like, and then I was a housekeeper for many years before I figured out what was next. And so I have no problem doing, like, quote unquote, the dirty work. That's never been a problem. um, I think the biggest thing is managing a schedule, because it's your schedule. I'm also an entrepreneur like yourself, and so it's managing your schedule, but then it's managing your mom's schedule, your mom-in-law's schedule, like managing all the schedules. Definitely, I use Google Calendar, although we were speaking about it doesn't quite adjust when you're setting the appointment in one time zone and you move to another time zone. That's a little tricky, but I've learned how to do that. But sharing Google Calendars is really important, or other people do Apple calendars, is, some other calendars that are online, so that I can see what's going on out in Albuquerque. She can see what's happening here. Judy can, my wife. So that helps us manage that. But I think the most important thing is take care of yourself. Find and it doesn't have to be much, but make sure that you take some time right before bed, earlier in the morning, getting up, so that you have time to, like, just be grateful. Basically, I'm grateful. We're grateful to have our moms. It is complicated, but we're grateful to have them. And they basically are showing us what healthy live, like, what longevity is, and um, what our life is like, and what we'll go through, as we're watching them say goodbye to things that they can't do anymore, right? And the grief that comes up with that. So it's learning, like, oh yeah, you're letting go of this, and then this, and hopefully it'll be a little easier for us when we get to that point as well. So just make sure you take care of yourself.
Marty, your wealth word is legacy artist. Tell us a little bit more about this.
Yes, so I ended up I ended up probably 35 years ago. After I got crispy around the edges, as you know, from teaching high school biology in New York City public schools, I ended up deciding to start this business, Memories Out of the Box. And the idea was that we take a lot of photos, obviously, collect lots of things in our lives. It's like, and we inherit them, right? We've just been talking about that as well with our families, right? We inherit these photos and documents and memorabilia, and it's basically the material that we would create our personal museum from, right? our homes are like our museums, right? And these are the things that for some reason have come into our lives. But a lot of photos, documents, memorabilia, that kind of stuff, unfortunately often gets stuck in a box, a bag, a suitcase, a storage unit, an attic, a basement, and, people, it's important and people move those things over and over and over again, but they get overwhelmed with just the amount of stuff there is, right? So I started over 30 years ago, 35, 40 years ago, helping people with this challenge of what do you do with all these things? Because you're not going to display all the photos. You're not going to, necessarily keep all the memorabilia, out, you're not going to make shadow boxes about every single thing, right? So the challenge is you have to organize it and then you have to curate it. You have to choose things that tell enough of the story, your family's story, the country's story. That's the other thing. Our stuff is not necessarily only our stuff. It tells a story. Like I was telling somebody recently, it's like good thing that the minimalists and Marie Kondo, they didn't come around and like get really really hot in during the time that the National Museum of African American History was created, because museums and historical societies are great big show and tells. That's what they are. And thankfully people hadn't thrown away these things that tell part of our history, and it can literally be in our basements and our attics. So needless to say, it's not like people often said, oh, when I talked about memories out of the box, oh, you scan photos. Well, that might be a part of the process, but the biggest part is organizing and curating. And then it's figuring out what my client wanted to create. What's the end product of it? And if they want to make multiple copies of things, if they want to put this up on a website, whatever their choice, then things would get digitized, they would get scanned. So it was, other people say personal historian, they use that term to describe what they do, but those have been mostly my friends and colleagues who I love, who are mostly memoir writers, oral historians, video biographers, or legacy filmmakers. And they work with some of the material, the stuff that I work with, but they generally do interviews and, all of that. My end products are basically memory prompts. It's basically, instead of a film or a memoir that is like 400 pages long that gets, read once and put up on the shelf, unfortunately, because we just don't have, like you said, we just don't have that kind of time to go through it over and over again. Most of my clients have wanted a good old fashioned scrapbook. So they want the baby teeth, the locks of hair, the letters, the thank you notes, the baby announcements, the wedding announcements, all these things. They want that so that they can go through and continue to tell their story, which I call their legacy. I believe legacy is so much more than money and property in terms of real estate, right? This is our story, our family stories, and I think they go through this process. So that's what I do, is create these things from this. And I've had clients say, how did you know that card should have been on the same page as that, baby tooth or whatever? And I'm like, I'm a photo listener, not a whisperer. I'm a photo and memorabilia listener. I listen to the story. And what I love is that it continues to provide people the opportunity to retell the story by going through, instead of reading the words that were told once that are in black and white on ink on paper. They get to retell it, and other people get to, well, that's not how I was at that same party and this didn't, you know what I mean? So it's about legacy. Being a legacy artist is creating these opportunities for deeper connections and community, to be created while experiencing that. So that's why I call myself a legacy artist.
And it is such a wealth of information for all of us, all of our lives, our histories, because, it's one of those things as you get older, it's like, wow, if I had one more chance to talk to my grandmother or my grandfather, what could I know? What could I learn about them?
Right, right. And that's another thing, and that's one of my biggest messages is don't get so precious about it. Don't get worried about being perfect. Take this opportunity now, and even if the person is gone, you still have some of their story. Tell it, record it, write it down, do it on video, do it on audio. You just because the person is gone doesn't mean the story is gone. As long as you record it and you hold on to it, it's still there. So keep on doing it. And don't, if the person's there, just take out your phone. Don't worry about what audio equipment you have or what video equipment. Just take out your phone. Take the opportunity to do that, because I just hear over and over again, it's that people wait too long and then they lose that opportunity.
What was your inspiration? Do you remember the day that you're like, wow, this is really cool. I would love to do this.
So yes, as a matter of fact, I do. I was visiting. This was after I got crispy around the edges, not burnt out, but crispy around the edges, and I was just like, there. I believe that there was a fair amount of money put into the an entrepreneurial programs during this period of time. I was at early 2000s, and so there were a lot of different, and I got familiar. I was like, oh, and they're asking me, well, what kind of business would you want? So that was in my head when I was getting burnt out or crispy around the edges. And so I was visiting a friend in West Asheville, North Carolina, and who I was staying with, but other friends had moved up from Florida, and I was going to see them after probably 5 years. I hadn't seen them, but they had a very limited amount of time to meet with me to visit because they were taking off. So the thing that my friend wanted to share with me is that in the time that I hadn't seen her, she'd become an aunt. And she just loved, like, she lived, like, she, like, lit up about being an aunt. And so she was talking about them and she was like, "I've gotta show you some pictures." So she ran to her room to try to get the pack of photos, and, find it to come and show it to me. She probably spent, like, grabbed it, came out, "Oh, it's not in there," went back, probably spent 10 minutes of our 45 minutes looking for this photo that she wanted to share with me, and she didn't find it. And I thought, wow, how many of us, again, these are the souvenirs of our lives. It's not, as I mentioned before, it's not that things matter. It's the stories that get attached to these things. The memory when we look at that photo and we remember that experience, we remember that wedding, that funeral, that, christening, that, you know, solo trip that we finally went on, whatever it is, like it brings all of that back. And I thought, how many people do this? How many people, you know, can't find the photo, can't find put their hands on something? What kind of problem is this? And then I started asking, you know, is this, are you and every I'd say, that box of photos, and you could literally see people go boing, like 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 the bubble, like they were like, yep, I see it. And especially in New York City where I was, and people are like, oh my God, I have no room. But there's, I've got in the corner, 5 boxes of photos, or a shoebox at least, or whatever. I had one woman come with a shoebox, literally a shoebox of all these black and white photos from her parents. They were born and raised in Russia. She had moved to the United States. She was a new mom. I think we met when she had her 2-year old. Then she came back with her 1-year old, a couple of years later. And anyway, she was just like, what do I do? And it was just all in the box, and they were wrinkled and stuff like that. And she's like, but this is my history. Like, what do we, So I ended up talking it through, like, what would you like in it? And she wanted a scrapbook. She wanted this a scrapbook, and she didn't have much memorabilia. This was really the only thing, these photos, all different sizes, like little teeny ones, little bigger ones, just every size in the book. And that's why I love scrapbooks. Not, the glitter glue and the stickers and things like that. Not the crafting thing, which is wonderful, but it's not my style. And it wasn't my clients. They didn't want that style either, although it's beautiful. I know people who do it, but they just wanted it on the page, simply put together. So I'm like, so do you want me to do all your dad's stuff here before they met, your mom's stuff before they met, and then when they met, and then when you came, like, how do you want me to organize it? And oh my God, she's just thrilled with and so this is, yes, I absolutely love what I do, but this is how it started, is that one woman's problem trying to find my friend Susan, who we're still friends, we're still quite, in connection. I was just in North Carolina not long ago and I saw her. But yeah, it was just like, why do we do this? Why do we collect all these things, have all these experiences, have souvenirs of the experiences in some ways, and then we just stick them in a box?
I love your title also because you do a program where people get to do like kindergarten, a show and tell, but it's show and tales to tell the tales of what they're sharing.
Correct.
Tell us the
Yeah.
more about this.
Yeah. So, needless to say, over 30 years ago, when I started Memories Out of the Box, that's my first business, although my accountant would say it was my first hobby, but that's fine. I love what I do, and I don't mind that it's a hobby. I really don't. My clients have been happy, and it's made me happy. And thankfully, I haven't had to like worry too much in terms of financial stuff, just because I don't need a lot. So I don't spend a lot. Um, but I started that, but needless to say, over 35 years ago, 40 years ago, I imagine many of your listeners may not even have heard of anybody doing this work, right? So, and back then, wasn't at all. Now, needless to say, there is a wonderful organization, not really fond of their of their name, but it's wonderful. It's called the Photo Managers, and it's an association of like 1,000 people who are all over the world, who help people with their photos, their documents, their memorabilia, digitally, physically, everything in between, helping all in all kinds of ways. 35, 40 years ago, there wasn't any, I mean, there were probably people doing it, but we didn't know each other. So now, yes, there is the photo managers. Absolutely, highly recommend them for any of your listeners that are looking for that work. Now that I'm a digital nomad, I really can't do that work because I don't really like digital organizing and helping digitally. I'm like a kid in a candy store when I get boxes and bags and suitcases full of things, and I can touch them, Civil War diaries and, uh, death certificates and, like marriage certificates and all of these kinds of things. Like that's the kind of stuff I love. But it was not very common back then. And so I was like, how am I going to market myself? So what I realized from the people that found me, kind of, you know, just randomly found me and hired me, was that it's word of mouth. It's absolutely word of mouth. You have to, get to be known, liked, and remembered, right? A rapport has to be there. They have to trust you, right? So I was like, okay, it's word of mouth, but I desperately need more mouths. And so at the same time, as I was thinking about that, a lot of my friends were getting into storytelling. So they would start storytelling events, usually at bars and restaurants in New York City. This was Brooklyn. And they, would invite people and, they, have them get up and tell stories. But it was very much like you can't have a prop, you can't read from something. You get 18 minutes. It was very, very limited as far as I was concerned, because I'm sitting and supporting my friend by going to this event, But I'm like, what do you mean you can't bring something? I'm like, what do you mean you can't read from something? Because like I said, Civil War diaries, World War II love letters, things, the stuff that I came across. I'm like, why can't you bring these things and read from them? And so that's how I started originally show and tell. It was just show and tell. And I thought, well, I can invite people to bring their things, their objects, the things that matter to them, and tell their stories, and have other people, get to know one another, because I'm all about community and connection, and then get to know me. So I started that over a decade ago. I've hosted over 250 of them, both in person, mostly in person the first 6 years. And now I'm using it for team building and volunteer appreciation, just ways for people to get to know each other better so that they can, work or support or volunteer or whatever. And also for family reunions, using these things, because needless to say, at a family reunion, every person from the youngest to the oldest can share the story of one thing that tells a little bit of their personal history or their life story. So I started as a way to market showing memories out of the box. But what I've come to realize, as we've talked about before, this is what I was born to do, was to facilitate story. I call them story sharing instead of storytelling, because storytelling is very performative. It's very much like you put up a fourth wall. It's very practiced. It's beautiful. I have friends that are in it, and it's amazing to go. But what I noticed at all of those is that when the storytelling is over, everybody gets up and leaves. Whereas at every single one of mine that were in person, people stay and they approach one another, even if they haven't known each other before they walked in. They approach one another because they can ask more about, tell me more about that wooden spoon. Tell me more about that watch that doesn't work. That's your grandfather's who passed away. Tell me more about this. Like it gives them an opportunity to connect. And that's what I'm all about in this time where we're all dealing with social isolation and loneliness. My passion is to bring this to lots of places and have people use it as a way to build deeper connections.
Well, hello. I'm Sylvia Torstein. Health, wealth, and happiness. Happiness. Look at this. Look at this. I wake up to the beautiful views here this morning. The breeze, the 70-degree weather, the mountains, the golf course. Hello. Can it get any more beautiful? Oh, I'm sure it could. It could. But just being here in the mountains, a little mountain retreat, a little mountain me. I'm not sure who that is, but just here. Listen to the birds. Can you hear the birds? Oh, this is happiness. This is pure joy. Nature. And then, some refined nature with some moas and some, yeah. So, find yourself some happiness today. I'm Sylvia. Martie, your happiness word, location independent, relationship that I'm going to let you tell us about.
Yes, I think I said location independent wife. Needless to say, better than I do even, that health, wealth, and happiness are all interrelated, right? So as I said, I just feel so grateful. We feel so grateful to have our moms still with us. They're an example of how to live well and live well into your older ages. And so I'm so grateful for that. But yes, over 35 years ago, I ended up, after an 11-year relationship, my first relationship with a woman in Western Massachusetts, so on this side of the country. That relationship ended, and I had some good friends who said, "Oh, that's, hard after, a future 11 years. You think that this is it, like this, you're going down this path and this is your future, right?" I'm sure lots of your listeners understand about that, Lots of detours in life, right? Um, so needless to say, it was devastating. But then it was also sort of like, oh, now, so it was like, now what? And I had two friends who had left Cape Cod and moved to New Mexico, a little south of Albuquerque. And they said, come and stay with us for however long you want. And they really meant it. They really meant it. And I didn't know them all that well. They'd owned a bed and breakfast on in P Town, so I didn't know what I was getting into. But I packed up my little Toyota Camry station wagon with my tent and my cooking stove and my lantern, and I was like, okay, what's next life? And I traveled out there, and about 3 months into my being there, and they also were out there mainly to take care of one of their aunts who had dementia, Pearl. So I would relieve them every once in a while so that they could finally do a few things. But finally, about 3 months into it, they really didn't push me, but I kept on saying, I need to get out. I need to do something. And so I ended up seeing that there was a dance and a country western dance at this bar and up in Albuquerque. And it was an afternoon. So it was a tea dance. So you're not making any serious thing because you're not going out at night, right? We all know that. Like when you're dating or redating, we all kind of understand that. It's like, how much commitment can I make here? So the whole drive up, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, I was saying, just walk in, have one drink. You're not having fun. You can leave the whole time. Get there, park, open the door, same conversation I'm having with myself. I get into the bar. Thankfully, the bartender is super sweet and introduces me to the woman who's teaching the lessons. And, we end up and so that all kind of calms me down. I have my one drink and then I start dancing. And during that, they encourage you to switch partners. And I ended up meeting Judy, this woman. And I just thought, oh my God, gorgeous smile, big eyes, like just beautiful, great laugh. I heard her laugh whenever she was hanging out with others and dancing with others. And it just was like, oh, this is great. And I was getting ready to leave. And she came up and said, hey, a bunch of us are going to this other place that continue dancing. Would you like to go? And I said, sure, that would be great. So we go and I'm saying goodbye there in the parking lot. She leaves the next day for Las Vegas for training. And she's like, I know you're traveling. If you find yourself in Las Vegas over the next week, you're more than welcome to stay with me. And I was like, that's a little, that's a little forward. And she goes, don't worry, nothing will happen. And I was just like, and then I thought to myself, well, then why would I go? So anyway, she came back. Of course, we didn't have cell phones. I had to give her the landline in Belen with my friends. I said, give me a call when you get back. And anyway, we proceeded to fall in love, like really deeply for, 5 or 6 months. But I knew I wasn't ready after an 11-year relationship to move forward with it. I just knew it. So we eventually parted ways, and then 2019, remember the photo manager's story? I was going out to Albuquerque area for their conference, their 10th annual, I guess. And I thought, I've got to look her up. I've got to find out, what she's up to. And so I did. We went to lunch and I had all the same feelings. I found out she did too, but she had just started dating someone. And so we just let it be. But then in 2020, I was stuck in Asheville, West Asheville, North Carolina, in front of a friend's house. It brings a whole new meaning to BYOB. Bring your own bedroom, bring your own bathroom, bring your own Brooklyn. And I started writing letters to her, and she did to me. And then in May of 2020, we said, oh, I guess we're redating. But we are caregivers for our moms. And so this long distance thing is, it's a challenge, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. I feel so blessed. And like I said, the happiness, like honestly, I had given up on, finding a relationship. I was like, I'm perfectly content. As you can see, I love the work that I do. And so I was like, if this is it, this is good. This is really, really good. But then it was like the cherry on top is like reconnecting with Judy and falling in love all over again in with the idea of making this a permanent thing. And yeah, so we got married 2 years ago in June. And so I am a long distance, digital nomad wife. And my wife does not like van life, by the way. She's not fond of it. So I do the traveling. She's kind of a homebody, and that works just fine too.
If you could give the gift of health, wealth, or happiness, which would you give and why?
Absolutely happiness, without a doubt. Because happiness is independent of health and wealth. And unfortunately, sometimes health and wealth aren't totally in our control, whereas happiness always is. So that's why I would give the gift of happiness, is that's you can be happy. You can choose to be happy. You can choose to see the beauty, the gifts in life. And that's the gift I would encourage everybody to grab first.
Here's our question from our previous guest.
What is one piece of advice that you would give your younger self, knowing what you know now about health, wealth, and happiness?
The advice would be, as we've spoken about, is to not take it so seriously, not take life so seriously, and to trust the timing of it all.
Martie, it has been amazing to hear your stories and have you, the story sharer, share with us today. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. Right. Can you hold on one second?
Sure.
Speaking of my mom.
Oh!
Sandwich up there.
You're welcome to have it. I'm getting interviewed, Mom, so everything's perfect because we were talking about caregiving, and this is it.
Exactly.